Welcome back with Bob. Join our conversation. Email us with your questions or comments to bob@thebridge1120.com. We welcome your calls at 452-1120. That's 452-1120. Now, here's Bob Phillips on today's Christian Talk 1120. The Bridge.
Hey, it's 6 o'clock already, and we are in the second hour of what's turning into a just tremendously fun program. I knew my joy quotient would go up as soon as Whitney Morgan got here, and it did. And difficult topic, gender dysphoria, and I'm sure that many of you have additional questions about it. We will pick it up again, if not today, in a future episode, because it's such a burning topic in the modern America that we live in these days. But we're going to shift gears right now to a different and equally controversial topic, and that is evolutionary science and the teaching thereof in public schools. And our guest is Robert Marks of Baylor University, a professor of engineering, a senior researcher at the Evolutionary Informatics Lab. I'm going to find out what that is. And the co-author of a new book called Introduction to Evolutionary Informatics, with two other authors, William Dembski and Winston Ewart. And Dr. Marks, thanks for being part of our program. I spoke of you in the first hour. I know you're a believer in the Lord, as well as an engineer and a professor, but I know you approach the topic that we're going to discuss primarily from a mathematical and computer science type approach. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say that my work, well, first of all, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you.
I really appreciate being invited. Yes, my work is based on my expertise in a computer science field called evolutionary computing. Believe it or not, engineers use something called evolutionary computing to do things, like design things. And I also have a background in something called algorithmic information theory, which sounds kind of pompous, but I tell you, some of the results from algorithmic information theory are so incredible, it makes all of the science fiction I watched as a kid boring.
It doesn't sound pompous, it's just above my pay grade. So explain to us deplorables in the audience what that means.
Algorithmic information theory actually leads one to incredible conclusions, one of which, this is one of the astonishing results. One can actually prove in algorithmic information theory that there are things which exist, and you can also prove that they are unknowable. So there's questions often about what is unknowable and what is knowable. With algorithmic information theory, you can prove, there's something that exists. One of them is something called Chaitin's constant. And it's something which exists, it's on your computer, but it's unknowable. And I think it has some very nice theological implications also.
I was going to say, where Thomas Aquinas leaves off, you guys with algorithmic informatics take over.
It sounds like it'd be handy to have that kind of knowledge when you're taking a test, too.
Yeah. All right, but
okay.
the basis for getting you on the show is the op-ed piece that you wrote in last week's Dallas News. It was probably in some other newspapers around the state, and it relates your field of expertise to the battle over evolution education in Texas right now. What was it that motivated you to write the article, and give us the essential thesis of it in language that we can understand?
Well, I think fundamentally that there's a evolutionary biologist, Robert Shapiro at the University of Chicago, that says that most debates about evolution ignore all of the results that have happened in evolutionary theory and microbiology over the last 30 years. And I think indeed that's the case. There are lots of exciting things which have come out. My area is primarily modeling. I'm not a biologist. I'm a computer engineer, computer science, and I am interested in modeling evolution and other phenomena. It turns out that any solid science, and you can just make a list of electromagnetics, mechanics, quantum theory, relativity, geology, and even soft sciences such as finance, are modeled through solid mathematical formalism that win Nobel Prizes, actually. And my basic premise is that there currently exists no model to explain neo-Darwinian evolution. And I need to define that, by the way,
Please.
because I've actually argued with people about evolution for a half hour, and at the end we were talking about different definitions of evolution. So it's important to do that.
Please.
By neo-Darwinian evolution, I refer back to Darwin's Origin of the Species, where we have evolved by some magical evolutionary process from a single-cell organism into the complexity that we see today. Typically, the evolutionary process is credited for giving this complexity. And in fact, from the area of computer science and modeling, no, it isn't the evolutionary process which gives this creativity. It's actually an embedded source of knowledge in the evolutionary process.
What do you mean by what do you mean by embedded source of knowledge?
There has to be somebody who guides it. There has to be intelligence behind the process.
I see.
And with neo-Darwinian evolution, it's a blind process. It says, okay, we have these repeated iterative process, survival of the fittest, repopulation, mutation. Then you go back through this operation. Through this, some magical way, one gets the incredible complexity that we see today. And indeed, that isn't the case, number one. And number two, having analyzed all of the major computer programs, simulations published by those that are proponents of neo-Darwinism, we showed that this was true, that hidden in their programs, I don't think they did it on purpose, but I think they're numbed by familiarity. But embedded in their programs is a guidance which allows their computer programs to achieve success.
So putting it in my simple language, what you're saying is that the evolutionists who try to argue in favor of accidental evolutionary development really have to set up a computer model to justify it with an intelligence embedded in it that's guiding the process contrary to the fundamental premise of evolution.
To neo-Darwinian evolution, yes, exactly.
I understand it.
Well done.
I think I might get a C on a quiz. Hey, can you? We're with Dr. Robert Marks from Baylor University, and what a fascinating approach to evolution and evolutionary theory that this man has. We're going to explore it more fully with his blessing and the Lord's after these messages. Please don't go away. This is really important stuff.
Turning Point with David Jeremiah at 10:30 a.m. and Bob Phillips from 5 to 7 in the afternoons on today's Christian Talk 1120, The Bridge.
The bridge traffic. We have a few accidents around town, including North IH-35 Service Road southbound and 11th Street over in Central Austin, William Cannon Drive and Brody Lane over in South Austin, and Burnett Road and Kramer Lane over in North Austin. So we have accidents all over town, so be careful as you drive around. Austin weather area forecast, a high of 89 on your Tuesday tomorrow, high of 90 on Wednesday, and 84 on Thursday. We have a low of 61 come tonight. It's 81 right now in Austin, 79 in Georgetown, 78 in Burnett, and 81 in Rollingwood. Bob Phillips will return on the Bridge 1120, today's Christian Talk, in just a few moments. Speaking of everything, thanks for spending the afternoon with us.
So are you like me? Did your portfolio go in the tank back in 2008 when we had our last big market crash? Did your financial advisor, like mine, lose more than 30% of your life savings? And did you feel totally helpless to do anything about it because you're, like me, not very good at the investing world because it's so confusing and murky? Well, there's a seminar coming to Austin June 2nd and 3rd at the Renaissance Austin Hotel, a Christian investing company called Tradeway, founded by David Mitchell, and they're going to help you break down the confusing world of finance so that you can understand it and take control of your own affairs. You know, regardless of whether the market's up or down, if you're paying a financial advisor like I do, they get a percent, 1 or 2% of your entire portfolio, whether it lost 30% or gained 30% in the last year. Tradeway will help you decide whether you're ready, and they will help you not just decide, but get ready to manage your own investment goals through taking small steps. In fact, that's their motto. Big goals, small steps. And that first small step is to go to their 2-day event, June 2nd and 3rd, at the Renaissance Hotel, called Step 1, Start Your Journey. Put it on your calendar, Tradeway, June 2nd and 3rd, at the Renaissance Austin Hotel.
This will sound like a horror story, but for some people, it's reality during tax season. Imagine you head to the mailbox after doing your taxes. You reach in, discard all the junk mail, and then pull out the item you've been waiting so long for, only to get a huge shock. Someone's already filed for your return. You probably didn't know that identity thieves could use your personal information to file for your refund or commit other forms of ID theft. In fact, the IRS identified approximately $4.1 billion in suspected identity theft tax refund fraud in 2016 alone. Thankfully, there's LifeLock. With LifeLock, you have access to a team of U.S.-based specialists who know the steps to take and the calls to make to fix identity issues, whether it happens during tax season or any other time. Of course, no one can prevent all identity theft or monitor all transactions at all businesses. Join now and get 10% off by using promo code ELDER. Call 1-800-LifeLock or head to lifelock.com and use promo code ELDER, that's ELDER, to save 10% now at lifelock.com.
Go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you.
Ever want to hear the words of Jesus? Be surrounded by the sounds of the crowd in Jerusalem. The Breathe Audio Bible is an experience so vivid, it's like being there. Performed by leading actors such as Kevin Sorbo, John Rhys Davies, Josh Lucas, and Jesse McCartney. You'll be transported into the world of the New Testament. The Breathe Audio Bible. Experience it yourself and get a free Gospel of Mark download at Breathe.
Welcome back with Bob. Join our conversation. Email us with your questions or comments to bob@thebridge1120.com. Now, here's Bob Phillips on today's Christian Talk 1120. The Bridge.
Our guest is Dr. Robert Marks of Baylor University, Distinguished Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering, author of a recent book called Introduction to Evolutionary Informatics. And Dr. Marks is not just a brilliant analyst and mathematician, but he's been a consultant for Microsoft, Boeing, and other big companies. He's been listed as one of the 50 most influential scientists in the world today by the bestschools.org. And Dr. Morgan was telling me off the air that when she gets her chance here, she's going to ask some questions of Dr. Marks that have nothing to do with the topic.
Well, you know how smart he must be? He's got electrical and computer engineering degrees. Dr. Marks, I just stayed in the studio because I wanted to fangirl.
And she wants to ask you questions.
I tell you,
she wants to ask
Dr.
you questions
Morgan,
about where to send her child to school.
Okay.
But we're going to hold that.
We're following a discussion on gender dysphoria, you're a hard act to follow.
Oh my goodness!
That's
all Bob's
fault. Hope we're doing well.
Yeah, you guys are way above my pay grade in both subjects. But let me get back to the topic. And I was so proud of myself that you said I understood the thesis of your article, which is essentially that the computer science area in which you're an expertise has not yet come up with a computer model to mirror or corroborate neo-Darwinism, because it's based on a false premise that cells and beings develop without an intelligence guiding them.
Yes.
So if an evolutionist is trying to put together a computer model that would corroborate their view, what would they have to do?
Well, one has to realize that the end result of any evolutionary process, I think all sides would say, is something which is designed or appears to be designed. And all design, at least done by human beings, is iterative. In other words, you have to try this again and again. You probably have examples in your home. WD-40, for example, is so named because it was a water displacement system that was perfected on the 40th try.
Huh.
Same thing with Formula 409. It took them 409 experiments to get the formula right. So it is an iterative sort of process, as is the evolutionary process: survival of the fittest, repopulation, mutation, again and again and again. And so, therefore, the number of steps that you require depends on your domain expertise and the degree of intelligence that you infuse into the process, either the search process. That WD-40 was invented by an industrial chemist, and it took him 40 tries. But if it was tried by, say, a high school chemistry student, it might have taken them 5,000 tries, and we would be using WD-5000 today. So therefore, this degree of expertise is necessary to guide any sort of design process. And so that's indeed what we have. Yes.
So basically, what I've heard before, do you still consider this still part of intelligent design theory?
I don't like the word intelligent design because it's a label that brings negative. Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
but basically,
I would certainly say that, because we haven't identified what the source of that guidance is.
Right. And so, but what you do, basically it comes down to statistics, right? I remember the simplest explanation for me when it came down to I think summarizing the work that you and others are doing in this is, statistically it's not just improbable, it's essentially impossible for accidental happenings or accidental coincidences to have formed the sophisticated life forms that they say that it did.
Absolutely. One of the challenges, and this, by the way, is in our book, which we tried to write at a lay level. I don't know how successful we were, but there do not exist the probabilistic resources in the universe to explain the small chances that would be needed in order for evolution to work. It's like Lloyd Christmas at Dumb and Dumber. You remember he asked Mary what were the chances, and Mary said, 1 in a million. And what she was trying to do was say it was impossible.
Right.
Well, more formally, we have something called Burrell's Law, which says if something becomes too improbable, that we have to announce it as impossible.
So you're saying there's a chance.
So you're telling me there's a chance. That's right. And I think that's the response sometimes we get from those who support the neo-Darwinism. So you're telling me there's a chance. No, there isn't. There are certain small probabilities that I could go out, there's 10 to the 80th atoms of the universe, and I could go out and choose one, go to a far galaxy and choose an atom somewhere, and then ask you to do the same thing. And you choose it totally randomly. The chance of you and I choosing the same atom would be 1 chance in 10 to the 80th. I'm sorry, that's impossible. And so we can talk about things like the probabilistic resources of our universe, and we do that in the book, and make some much more drastic calculations than I just described, and show that that these probabilities just aren't large enough to explain anything that the neo-Darwinists would have us believe.
And this controversy, these problems with neo-Darwinian theory, are playing out in Texas at the public school level, which appears to be the basis or the motivation behind your article. Can you address that a little bit, Dr. Marks, about the flaws in the political and educational realm that are being foisted upon our school children because of some of the false scientific premises and mathematical deficiencies in neo-Darwinian theory?
Well, I think that currently, as I understand it, that much of what is taught is dogma, which has kind of been around for a long time and comes from a totally naturalistic, materialistic foundation. I think if one is more broad and allows in the idea of external intelligence, then one can actually analyze these problems with a much broader framework. I don't think that bringing in intelligence, such as intelligent design, actually narrows what you can do. It actually broadens it. And there are significant problems with the modeling of evolution. That's what I do. Some of the things that Shapiro has done at the University of Chicago have been jaw-dropping. Again, I'm not a biologist, but understanding it from a lay perspective is just incredible. The changes in biology, the idea that junk DNA used to be thought to be remnants of evolution past. And now with the NIH's ENCODE project, we're finding out that this junk DNA has purpose, it has function. So things are changing. And like Shapiro said, we're not addressing this stuff which has happened for the last 30 years, and these objections need to be aired to the students so they can have the ability to do some critical thinking.
Well, and that's, to me, as a parent, thank God my kids are past the age of being in the public school system. They're now in college and beyond, one of whom, by the way, is a junior at your institution, Joey Phillips. So if you see Joey on campus... what is Joey's major? He's majoring in journalism, so he's staying, just like I did, as far from science as possible because of our. You talk about DNA; it's not in our DNA. But back to the public school issue. The State Board of Education, as of last week, was in this tug of war over how to word the language in the state biology curriculum standards on evolutionary theory, and they were debating whether to require evaluating the scientific explanation of origins versus identifying. Are you familiar with that seemingly semantical technicality that they're dealing with?
Well,
or
not only am I not familiar with it, your words just kind of passed me by.
Well, essentially what they're debating is whether to make kids assume evolution and therefore just evaluate it as truth, or whether they're going to be allowed to do what you're saying, which is critically think about it and identify the strengths and weaknesses of it.
I think that all science should be taught that way. If you look in our history, there used to be solid science that bleeding would cure people of illnesses. And that was solid science at one time. Undisputed. We used to have that photons were particles, and some people said they're waves, and they would argue back and forth. No, they're particles and waves. I mentioned junk DNA, which has recently been resolved as being incorrect. I would go back 15 years, and as I understand it, junk DNA, people pounded their desks and said, this is truth, this is scientific truth. So I think we always have to be critical of science, especially in emerging areas.
And as a Christian, and I'm sorry we're out of time with you, Dr. Marks, I'm going to have to let you go, but one of the more encouraging things that I've learned from talking to you both off the air and on is that you don't find any incompatibility with being a doctrinaire orthodox scientist and being an evangelical Christian.
Hear, hear.
But the point I'm making is that your devotion to science has in no way been incompatible with your devotion to the Lord.
Oh, my goodness, no.
Intellectually or otherwise.
No, in fact, I look at science and I see God everywhere in science and in the work that I do.
Amen.
So, absolutely.
Amen to that. Dr. Robert Marks, thanks for being part of the show. It just rushed by. His book is Introduction to Evolutionary Informatics. I'm going to go buy a copy and curl up by the fire. No, I'm not. I wouldn't have any idea what I was reading. But those of you who do should get it. It has to do with what we've been talking about, the scientific underpinnings, the mathematical underpinnings of evolutionary theory, or the lack thereof. We'll be back with Dr. Whitney Morgan, and this time we're going to talk about something that I do understand, which is Pokemon Go.
Truth for Life with Alistair Begg at 6:30 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. and Bob Phillips from 5 to 7 in the afternoons on today's Christian Talk 1120, The Bridge.